Mark Isham is a Grammy-winning musician and an Oscar-nominated film composer. His name is behind films such as A River Runs Through It, Crash, Point Break, The Accountant, Blade, Men of Honor, Save the Last Dance, and many more. We meet Mark in his stunning house in Los Angeles to find out a little bit more about his road to success.
Hi, Mark.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you.
I want to start from the beginning. I know that you grew up in a musical family, right?
I did.
Your parents were also musicians, but you grew up in New York.
I grew up in the city of New York, yes. My mother was a professional violinist, played in symphony orchestras all over the world, actually. But she was playing and teaching in New York City when I was born.
So did you ever consider another profession than music?
Never. Since as long as I can remember, this was it.
And how did it all begin? Like, when was the first time that you felt you wanted to pursue this professionally?
Not quite sure the first time. I remember sitting at the piano when I was very young and sort of making up stories and playing music along with it. My mother had a tape recorder, you know, an old Walden Sack tape recorder,
Yeah.
but she would record her practicing, and I would record some of these. So the idea, I think, of making music for storytelling and making recordings of it was bubbling under at a very young age.
I see.
Well, film composing actually came quite a bit later. I discovered the trumpet as an instrument when I was around 11. And decided that's what I wanted to do.
Hence the incredible collection that you have inside.
Yes, I have. Film composing pays well enough that I can afford to collect trumpets. I'm not sure that trumpet playing pays well enough to collect trumpets. But I love the instrument. I've had a passion for the instrument my whole life, and so yes, I own a few. But yeah, I decided I wanted to be first a classical player. I had heard Maurice Andre and I heard Baroque trumpet music. I thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And I pursued that for a number of years. And then I heard Miles Davis.
Yeah, wow.
And it all changed. And I became a jazz musician. My high school and early adult years were in San Francisco, which is sort of, it's much different than New York. I still lived in the city and had a sort of a city lifestyle, but it's much more relaxed than New York City.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but for me it was great because I was part of that quite infamous San Francisco scene. I recorded with, you know, Jerry Garcia and Carlos Santana and Van Morrison and all those guys that worked in the Bay Area during those periods. I was part of that scene and learned a tremendous amount. that was a very formative period for me as a musician.
Do you miss that sometimes, performing on stage?
I do.
You're a Grammy winner. Did you actually win the Grammy before going into film composing? Or
No, it was around
somewhere?
I think I'd been scoring films about 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And that first 6 or 7 years of my film composing career, I did both, about half and half. And then I had children.
I see.
And a performing career demands touring. And I decided to stay at home and compose.
And do film composing. I see nothing wrong with that. And then you got an Oscar nomination.
My brother Paul and I grew up in a time when the land was still untouched.
In Montana, there are 3 things we're never late for: church, work, and fishing.
It was a world of wonder and possibility.
I'm in love with Jessie Burns. With all the fish in the river. I'm not like her.
Tell me more about that project, The River Runs Through It. I mean, we've all seen that movie. We all love that movie. How did you go on board with it?
Mr. Redford actually had a composer previous to me, and they'd recorded a score, and Bob just never thought that it was what he really wanted. And he and I had met earlier and talked about working together, but he'd always hired someone else. And in a very risky move, to be honest with you, because if you're going to replace a score, you don't have a lot of time and you don't have a lot of money. You have to do it like quickly, and usually you hire a very seasoned professional to do that.
Yeah.
And I was younger in my career. I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't really whom you would go to for your first call to rescore something. And he just thought, I think he's got the sensibility. I think he's got what I want this score to sound like. I asked him, actually, once we were through the unknown period, and I asked him once when he was leaving the house, and he was very happy with what he was hearing, and I said, why did you hire me for this? And he said, I just have always remembered Never Cry Wolf, which is the first film I ever scored. And he said, I've always loved that score, and I thought just what I said, that you have the right sensibility for this.
Yeah. Well, ever since you've worked on a few more titles together, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, we started a nice run. I think we did 4 pictures together eventually.
How is it, working with him in particular, and generally, what do you think is the important thing for the bond between the director and the composer?
Well, the simple answer is communication. You have to be able to communicate well. But that requires all the various elements of what communication really is, because if someone says something, that's not just communication. You have to be able to duplicate what has been said to you, right? And then you have to be able to return a communication that includes the idea that you have in fact duplicated what was said. And that has to go back and forth correctly and inefficiently without mistakes and without confusion. And that's the most important thing. A composer has to be able to completely duplicate and understand what a director wants to do.
Because the composer actually works only with the director. I mean, he doesn't work with the rest of the crew and it's your own production. It's only with
we
the
sit
director.
alone in a dark room. And what we do.
You watch the rough cut.
And the product of that goes to the director.
How did the Oscar nomination change things for you after that?
I'm not sure it changed too much. It gave me a lot of confidence. This was a very, I came up through electronic music and sort of alternative music. I never studied traditional film scoring. The John Williams type of score I was always scared of that sort of thing because I never studied that. I never really understood that when I started. So to score a film like A River Runs Through It, I had to embrace that. I had to embrace the world of traditional orchestral film scoring. And the fact that I did do it and I did it at a high enough level to be acknowledged, that it was good work, it gave me a good deal of confidence that, yes, all right, you're the alternative electronic guy, but you can write a good orchestral score.
Speaking of the alternative electronic, I guess the soundtrack that's closer to that is Blade.
Played, yes, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So I guess you had a lot of fun composing that.
Absolutely, and I think that's why they came to me for that score, because my basic reputation in the early days was that sort of work, electronics. I have a vast collection of original analog synthesizers, and I love that world.
How does the movie have to impact you? Like, do you have to have some sort of connection already to the film in order to come up with something that you want to score for it? Or you don't necessarily have to like the story?
You have to find some point of connection. You know, I've certainly scored films which are not the most brilliant film. They're not my favorite films of all time. I will score films for different reasons. I'll score a film because I like the director, just as a friend, you know. And I remember when I did The Hitcher in the early days. I was a friend of Bob Harmon's for years before.
Yeah.
And he said, I've got this film, I would love you to score it. And I took a look at it and I said, Bob, what are you doing? Why do you make a film like this?
Oh God, what did he say?
And he gave me a very intelligent, creative answer. You know, it's an allegory. It's about the growth of a young man at a crucial point in his life, and he has to confront pure evil. And what does a human being do when they confront pure evil? Do they roll over and give up, or do they actually face it head on and come up with a way around it and a way through it?
And how do you feel when the film becomes a huge success, like Point Break, for example? That's like my generation's, you know, film that we were all so crazy about for various reasons, not just the music, I have to admit.
Absolutely.
But how does that make you feel that you've been part of something, you know, that will forever be as one of the greatest films in history?
I'm always very proud of it. It's always and sometimes with Point Break, you're never quite sure, you know?
Yeah.
You're never quite sure if people are going to embrace a film like that. And it was a sort of a generation-changing film in a way.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not sure that when it was in the process of making, everybody realized that it was going to be such a...
No, I don't think so. I just remember that Catherine was reshooting all the time, and we would be scoring, and she'd come in and says, "That's really beautiful, but here's the new picture."
When you go to the cinema or you watch a movie at home, can you stop being a film composer for a second and just watch it, or you always, you know?
Sometimes, not always. If I hear something that is, why did they do that? It just, it ruins it for me.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
but if they're doing a good job, I can usually sort of enjoy the film.
That's good. And what do you enjoy listening to for fun?
I don't actually listen to music for fun very much.
Then what
strangely
do you do
enough.
for fun?
I listen to a lot of comedy for fun. In the car, usually comedy. Mm-hmm. Old Robin Williams, you know, things like that. I did a period when I was listening to a lot of opera, because I loved opera when I was young. My mother was a violinist in the opera orchestra, so I would go and sit backstage and watch the operas.
What makes you happy in life? Doesn't have to be music.
No, I was going to say, I think that the thing I am actually makes me the most happy, and I'm really the most proud of, is my family. I have 4 children, and they're all...
4 children?
I have 4 children.
Wow, they're all boys?
No, 3 boys and a girl.
You have 1 girl.
We have 1 girl.
And you have only 1 musician from them?
Yeah. Well, we'll still see the girl.
She's young?
She
She's the
could
youngest?
be. Yeah, she's 15.
Okay.
And she's got a tremendous amount of musical talent, but so far not a lot of discipline.
I see.
So
Well,
we'll see what happens.
I noticed that your wife is also a creative person. She's
Yes.
an artist. There
Right.
are some amazing paintings that we saw
Yeah.
inside. So I guess they don't have much of a choice. None of them is going to be an economist.
Probably not. Yeah, we have one musician, my middle son, who's a singer-songwriter, and 2 filmmakers, and we'll see what happens with the princess.
Oh, princess, that's beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Sea Wines.